I am here with the wonderful Ian Morris from Listening to Smile, sound alchemist extraordinaire. How are you, Ian? How you going?
I'm doing good.
Yeah,
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for
awesome.
having me.
Thanks for being a guest on my humble podcast. Um,
I'm excited.
One thing that really curious about, you said, I was doing a little bit of reading up on you, and you said that you suffered from poor health um, and dyslexia. What was that poor health all about? Can you tell me? Can we go a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah. So now looking back, I can say that it's from definitely suppressing emotions. I played sports, most of my early life. So baseball, football, basketball, those kind of things. And,
Mm-hmm.
um, males are just really taught to shake it off, suppress, and just be tough all the time and be strong and all that. And that was definitely part, one side of my dad that was like, always don't cry, shake it off, keep, be tough, all that stuff. And, I think that just growing up in that sports mentality for most of my life, when things happen, I never dealt with them emotionally. I just kind of pushed them down and kept going. And even so much so that like my sister passed away when she was 21 in a car wreck. And then before that, 2 years, my dad passed away from a diabetic heart attack in his sleep. And from the next 5 years after those two deaths, I had about 7 people that were really close to me pass away in car wrecks and suicide and a lot of untimely, deaths. And it was something that I just kept pushing down. I never really grieved my friends, my family, and I just kept moving, working, pushing forward. And then around 2010, 2011, I started getting these physical, where all of that suppression of emotion started turning into physical manifestations. I started getting rashes on my skin when I would eat foods I had ate my whole life, never had problems with, peanut butter, strawberries, all kinds of different. And I would have intestinal issues, chronic migraines, just muscle spasms where my muscles would just start going crazy, out of nowhere, and it was all over my body. And I started just really getting super brain fog, not having clarity or focus mentally, and just having chronic pain, mostly abdominal and like, intestinal pain every time I would eat anything. So then it got to the point where I didn't want to eat anything, and just really shut down. I can remember at one time when the pain was the worst, I went almost 12 days without eating anything, just kind of drinking water, tea, and just trying not to eat because the pain was so great from eating. So it took like a year and a half, going to different specialists and, going through the whole terrible process of going through mainstream diagnosis.
Yeah, yeah.
But two different doctors, one had said that he believed that it was MS, and another doctor said he
Hmm.
believed that it was colon cancer, that he
Wow.
saw the symptoms, but that he was thinking that they were mimicked, through other root causes, to be colon cancer. And so I honestly can't say really what that was because there was just so much confusion from the different specialists that I was seeing. And I had so many symptoms that,
Yeah.
were. So I remember being really frustrated and leaving the emergency room that night and going home and getting online and doing a lot of research about holistic options for the symptoms that I was having. And some of the things that I came across were sound healing and meditation, mindfulness techniques. The first book that I really dove into was The Healing Power of Sound by Dr. Mitchell Gaynor. And it really talked a lot about some of the things that I was going through, everything from like heart palpitations and, the different mental issues of like brain fog, non-clarity, no focus. And so just addressing those things and seeing some of the breath work techniques and some of the intention settings and like how that whole mind body approach was something that I wasn't doing, at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so by incorporating headphones with the frequency music and using those mindfulness techniques, within 2 weeks, I started seeing huge changes in my body. The pain threshold had definitely changed, where I was starting to realize how powerful that connection is between the mind and body. And by diving in deeper, about 20 minutes each day, I started seeing those effects in the body as well as the mind. And then within a few months, I started seeing huge changes in my dyslexia. Like where before I would read a page in a book when I, just being normal without this, modalities or work, I would read a page and I would have to read it like 5 or 6 times to really take in the information.
Yeah.
But now, this was a few months in of doing this, I started seeing that when I was reading new things, because I was doing so much reading at that time to try to figure out what was going on. I started seeing that I would read it one time and kind of retain the information. And so much so that when I was explaining the book to other people, I'd be like, yeah, it's on chapter 4, page 23, paragraph 2. And people are like, man, that's pretty robotic, and like, but it was something that it was just really sticking. And I think that I always say now that frequency is the great disruptor, where basically our old belief patterns and just even neuro network that we have set up and established, the connections are kind of just all put in a holding pattern. When you start listening to frequency music, it's like it disrupts those normal, pathways, neuro pathways, as well as the kind of belief and stories and things that we've told ourselves. And you can actually sit in the quiet of the storm while you're listening to that frequency and start becoming an observer. And really, that was the first time in my life that I had done that. And so I really believe that the headphones and doing that frequency work made it possible for me to see other possibilities and perspectives, to create a different outcome, so.
Were you using anything else? Were you just doing this to help yourself? Did you change your diet? Were you taking any, prescription medication? Were you doing anything like that?
Yeah, so later I changed nutrition, but first my mind, I was 315 pounds then. So that was, I was, overweight. And it was something where I had played sports my whole life. And then whenever I got diagnosed with mitral valve prolapse and heart arrhythmias, neither one of those were fatal, but like when they were working together, like if my valve was having a problem and I was having an arrhythmia in my rhythm of the heart, it was, and they were doing that together, it would almost feel like you were having a heart attack. And so that ended my sports career. And so from that time, there was just a huge depression where I gained a lot of weight, and just kind of let myself go through, simple depression. And then food became a crutch. And that was the addiction, was sugar, salt, all of the things that you use to kind of enhance your mood when you're depressed. People eat ice cream or cookies or, pizza, or, whatever it is. And so, over a period of, 5 or 6 years, I gained a lot of weight and just was in this very massive depression. And so food was almost like an addiction that's, became a crutch, to get me through that massive depression. So when I found myself at this point, I was simply just addicted and depressed and overweight and just not in a good spot. And so what I know for myself that was the changing moment was introducing frequency because frequency allowed me to change my brain and to change the brain chemistry. And then through that, I was able to make more conscious decisions. Like, I don't want to be fat anymore. I want to lose weight and, like, you know, move into a new stage. And frequency on a daily basis, that consistency helped me change my vibration and my brain chemistry. And then
Yeah.
through that, making those better choices, and also learning more about food, like food combinations, um, as well as that pretty much, you know, 80% of the things that we go through can be fixed. You know, the issues that we have health wise can be fixed through nutrition, which
Mm.
is, you know, was a huge epiphany to me at that time. You know, the thing that was causing all these issues, you mean I can change this and it can fix me, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just becoming more enlightened and learning to make better conscious choices with the food. So it was definitely food, but I don't think I could have done that without changing the mind. So it was
Sure.
definitely those mindfulness techniques, the frequency, and then ultimately changing nutrition and getting to a new spot.
So how long did it take for you, you know, after using these techniques on yourself, seeing the changes and going, wow, like this stuff is incredible, like it really works.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something with this. Like, I'm going to take this further. I'm going to share this with the world, other people. How long did it take you before you did that?
So I went through, you know, 2010 to like 2015 was huge growth for me spiritually, emotionally. And, you know, at that time I was running a magazine called Wake Magazine, and I transitioned into listening to Smile. Listening to Smile started as kind of a project for me working with myself. And then, you know, friends and family that saw within I guess it was a year and a half, I lost about 110, 115 pounds
Oh, wow.
of weight. And that people seeing that, you know, like, man, you lost a person, or you, you know, you look completely different. And
Yeah.
so then when they would talk to me, people would say stuff like, you're talking faster, you seem smarter, you know, those kind of comments. And really what it came from is with my dyslexia, like someone would ask me a question and it might take me like 30 seconds or 20 seconds to respond to that person's question, because in my head I'm having this conversation or this dialogue that goes along with answering their question. Because of the way that my brain worked, it was just very slow compared to like other people. And so I saw a change in that, and I saw a change in the way I was able to retain information. I saw a change in focus and clarity of the mind. So I always tell people it was like there was cobwebs, you know, and like it just feels like that was all like spring cleaned, you know,
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And there was just more clarity and more focus. And so it was like being on and focused more so people could tell a difference. And so those friends and family wanted to try it out. And even so much that my mom had her third cancer battle. And I actually went home, got her a singing bowl, talked to her about nutrition and focus of, you know, using your mind to control your body. And, you know, it's a tough thing, like explaining to friends and family, like they've seen this change in you, and then they're like, well, how did you get there? And I said, well, it's really the mind battlefield. Like the
Yeah.
mind is a battlefield, and like you have to be the, you know, king or queen, where you're basically in charge of those thoughts, the thought patterns, the focus, the intention of your thoughts. And once you can gain control of leading or steering the mind, then you really have this powerful tool to control the body through that. And then when you add nutrition, you know, a healthy choice in nutrition with that, you're really giving the body all the things it needs to repair itself.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was my mom. It took her about 8 months, and then she's cancer free now. We
Wow.
went
That's
through,
awesome.
it was a very powerful experience and a learning experience. for me going through that with her. But, we planted organic garden in her backyard, and we got her watching funny movies and started watching documentaries about food and nutrition, and, and just making better choices and helping her with her mindset of having a more loving, powerful, empowered mindset so that she could overcome the challenges that she was facing. So I've watched people that we've worked with, from like autism to cancer to, dyslexia and other issues like that, down to even like chronic pain. And, it's really interesting when you're working with someone with chronic pain, because I've been there and I know that there's people who had far more, issues than what I even dealt with. But when you're in that mode, it's almost like you feel like you're sitting in a corner in a room by yourself, completely alone, and you're overwhelmed, and you're in this victimized state where it's like, why me? Why did this happen to me? And you're afraid, So it's like, if you can meet someone on the same level and say, hey, I've been there, I know what you're going through, but I have this tool. And if you're open to listening to this music and taking the right mindset, and, while listening, and coordinating those together, I really believe that you can find some, functionality in your life again. You can find happiness, and you can find a peace that will ultimately lead to your recovery, and so many different issues. And so that's really what listening to Smile was birthed from, wanting to give people those tools, and knowing what it felt like to be in that room by yourself, alone and overwhelmed, and just not wanting anyone to feel that way anymore. So that's where the company came from, was wanting to share that experience and to help other people find more clarity, focus, and health and release,
That's awesome. I totally understand that that particular mindset. I went through something similar myself, not with illness and stuff, but I guess with a type of mental illness.
Yeah.
So an addiction and that sort of stuff. So I totally feel you. Like you go through it, you go through that pain, you come through the other side, using whatever modality that you used for yourself that worked for you. And you're like, oh my freaking God, like this thing's amazing. Like I need to spread the word, tell everyone, show everyone. Cause
Yeah.
like if more people knew about this thing, X, whatever it is, people would be happier, thinner, better in every way, whatever it is,
Yeah. Yeah.
just healthier, body and mind. Yeah. So that's really cool. I totally understand that. Talk to me about the science of frequency. So what exactly is it? What does it do exactly? What's it doing to the mind? What's it doing to the body? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the simplest way to look at this is that frequency is pretty much everything in our perceived reality is a frequency of light or sound, right? And so you have vibrations. And so like in the mindset, like when you're thinking, if you say in the bathroom getting ready for your day and you're like, man, I'm fat, or you start having these judgments against yourself, or you choose a different mindset. And so this is a frequency that you're dealing with, the vibration of your thought. So if you're being critical and hard on yourself and being mean to yourself, that's a vibration, just the same as if you were uplifting, empowering, or speaking positively about the outcome of your day. That's a vibration.
And just to be clear, when you say vibration, you literally mean vibration. It's not like a woo-woo term as like vibes,
Yeah.
man. It's actual vibration. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what's interesting is even that woo-woo term, like good vibes, it's animals pick up on people's personalities and their energy that they carry.
Yeah.
So that's a way that you can say that vibration or good vibes, like the people like to always say, is very real. It's not just a woo-woo thing. It's a real term where dogs can sense the energy that you carry. You know, animals can sense the energy that you carry. And so by doing that, you know, people who are intuitive, you know, are very sensitive to energy like that in a very similar way. So all of these things that we're talking about are a vibration, like actual frequency, a hertz, you know, or cycles per second, however you want to look at it, of the wavelength of the energy, you know, moving. And so, you know, it's even from sun rays to, you know, just everything in your perceived reality is some form of vibration, you know. And so when you start looking at your mind and your thoughts, that's a really positive way to look at like sound healing. So if someone has a depression or an anxiety or a lower level vibration in their, you know, mental state and in their physical body, sound healing, those vibrations that penetrate, whether it's vibroacoustic, like a singing bowl, or like a gong, like being played over you or on you, you know, that introduction, you know, that vibration into the cells, into the, you know, the body, and even the ears, like the mental state perceiving like on a conscious level of that sound. What happens is, because it's what we would call like a pure tone, like just one note or one frequency, and there's no other, you know, melodies with it, it's just a pure tone, the mind actually focuses on that. And so what happens is, like, you'll hear a lot in binaural beats or pure tones where the brainwave state actually steps down to meet that frequency. So if you were in like a really anxious state, or like a very depressed, like just, you know, sadness or pain, and you had that lower vibration, and so we started using these higher frequencies, you know, like what people would say, like 528, 432, you know, the different frequencies for like the heart chakra, like 639 hertz, and introducing that to someone that has like a lower vibration, like depression, anxiety, fear. What ends up happening is the body is then changed, just like a pond. If you threw a rock in and the ripples go out, and it's, you know, it's basically sending energy waves through the body, and then the brain can sense that and feel that, and it can step down depending on what your intention is and what frequency you're working with. You can step the mind down into a more peaceful, relaxed state. And from that point, there's a chemical process that takes place. The brain is really the steering wheel for the body. So you see people like Bruce Lipton talking about epigenetics and those types of things. It's very similar to that. Those thoughts and feelings are, you know, changed by the introduction of that sound. That sound helps change those thoughts and feelings. Those thoughts and feelings start changing the chemical makeup. It starts changing the chemicals that it's introducing to the body, the hormones it's introducing to the body, so that it can create a more relaxed state. And through that, that's where you're going to start having release work and healing start to take place. Is really ultimately what we're targeting in this modality is stress. Stress is probably 90% of the reason that we go through most of the things that we go through. And, you know, when you're stressed, it's pulling processes and functions away from where it should be, you know, because it's like you create cortisol, adrenaline, all these different things that go through these stressful times, and it starts depleting wherever it can't find production for those hormones and chemicals. It starts pulling from like organ centers or different parts of your body. So it starts depleting you in the way that you're doing your filtering process, like when you're sleeping, you know, that gets the toxins out of your body. It starts taking energy away from those processes to create more cortisol and more adrenaline and all of those things. And it starts depleting your body. And that right there is how stress starts stealing away the health, you know, of your body. And from that process, then you're more susceptible. Your immune system gets compromised. It just goes on. It's like a dot that connects to so many different things. So the root for me is definitely targeting people's stress and helping them to get to a more relaxed state and a more confident state of having tools that can help them offset stress. so that ultimately you can actually have a functioning body that's helping you to heal and to do that release work. Because ultimately that's what we've seen with working with over 1,500 clients, on private sessions, is ultimately that the root cause of most everything comes down to stress is where it starts, and then from there, the other genetic issues happen and the other breakdowns happen. But really most of it can be traced back to those stressful points being the root cause.
Yeah, awesome. So, I mean, I've been doing a lot of quite a bit of research on frequency myself, and there's literally like hundreds, thousands of frequencies. Like, where do you start? Like, is there a best frequency? Like, like where do you start? Like, where do you go?
Well, for every person, that really will be different because the issues they're wanting to target will be different. And then also our vibration changes daily. People don't like to hear that because it makes them feel like it's more work, but it's ultimately not. What you're going for is you want to find something that resonates with you, that helps you find peace, that, ultimately. And so, like when people take a hot bath with Epsom salts and they get in there and they're like, oh, this is great. I can feel relaxed and I have some just time to myself. And that's what we tell people is just find 10, 15 minutes of time to yourself, put on the headphones in a safe and quiet space, and just dive deep into the music. And what I mean by dive deep is deep listening, which means that you're not playing on your phone, you're not watching other things go on, you're giving the music 100%, the tone, the binaural beat, you're giving it 100% of your focus, and you're actually listening to how the recording is evolving. Like, if it's got music, the melodies and like the instruments that are being used, you start singling them out and like really listening to the recording as a whole. If it's a pure tone, a lot of people will report hearing multiple things going on, even though it's just one note or one frequency. And I always look at that as kind of like an exploded parts diagram. Like when something is, when you start listening, it sounds like it's, you're looking at a piece of instrumentation, like, but then as you're listening, if you give it 5 or 10 minutes, it'll almost be like this exploded parts version where you're starting to hear multiple, undertones and harmonics and different things while you're listening. And people say, well, I hear those things, but how is that possible if it's just a tone? And it's a way, my explanation is your brain is, deciphering. It's figuring out the tone and how it's stepping down. And so some people, myself included, haven't been in a relaxed state for quite, some time, where it's like, when I was sick, I had probably never known what that felt like. I remember telling friends and family, like, I think this is, listening with headphones and doing the frequency music was the first time in my life that I've ever felt that way, where I felt truly relaxed and at peace. So basically, you have to really find something that resonates with you, number one. Number two, I think good places to start, like a lot of people like 432, a lot of people like 528. I think those are they're two different schools of thought, but they're also two very easy ways that you can just listen to two different frequencies. And to be honest, I haven't heard anyone, like people might say, I like 432 better than 528, but I've never heard anyone say I never got anything from either of those frequencies.
Sure.
So I think it's a good place to start 528 hertz, which is they call the frequency of love, and it's a C note. And then 432, which is an A note, and it's a different tuning. But a lot of people equate it with like a grounded frequency, like an earth or a nature tone, something that helps you get back to that type of mindset. If it's just hustle, bustle, you put on 432 and you can find a more peaceful, like, connection to nature, is what a lot of people will say. So a lot of people like both of those frequencies, and some people like one or the other, but I think it's a good place to start. And, the other thing I was going to say is a lot of people equate the frequencies with chakra, chakras in the energy centers of the body. But there's so many different schools of thought. So like there might be 7 different, diagrams of how the frequencies coincide with the hertz or the frequency. And so like it's because there's different tunings, like solfeggio scale is found in A equals 444. Standard tune like pop music is found in A equals 440. And then 432 is actually tuned to A equals 432. And so solfeggio comes from the Gregorian chants, and that type of mindset where the monks were working with vocal toning and healing the body with combinations of tones and notes being sung with the human voice over people who were actually sick. And then 432 is like Pythagoras, he's kind of like the godfather of mathematics and music. And he, was just very connected with people and using sound as a healing modality way back, in ancient times. And so, it's 2 different schools of thought, but it's definitely a good starting point is 432 and 528. And then from there, I would suggest working with chakras, because you can know this chakra works with this issue, and this issue, and I'm going to start with this frequency and see how it resonates with my root chakra or my heart chakra. And I think that would probably be the next evolution of like diving deeper, just as a good starting point, in my opinion,
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So, 440 hertz. There is some stuff that you can look up on the internet that tells you, the Germans, the evil Germans decided to put everything at 440 hertz to, make everyone sort of, I guess, unbalance and put some disharmony out in the world and create fear. What's your thought on that?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of, if you look at conspiracy theory, right? There's Freud's nephew, I believe, was really head of propaganda for the U.S. A lot of the corporations. And they would do a lot of things like convince people that bacon was healthy for breakfast. And they had so many amazing campaigns with their propaganda that people started really buying into that. And it was very similar in Germany, where the scientists and the propaganda people in charge of the propaganda were looking for ways to create docile followers, right? They wanted people to just be kind of lethargic and docile and just follow and not question, not be a unique thinker, but just be part of the herd. And so that's where they started developing things like putting fluoride in the water. They started looking at creating music in a different hertz that was stagnant to human growth. And even they studied plants, and it was showing like how 440 would even, stagnate plant growth. And so they were showing that if we can do all these different things and introduce these tools in subtle ways, we can create followers. And so in the United States, you have people like the Ford group, and the Rockefeller Foundation, where they were looking at how fast the Nazi party rose to power and how they controlled the country, through manipulation and propaganda. And they said, great, we need the same thing here so that we can create workers in the industrial, layout. We want people to come in and just do the same task over and over repeatedly and not question and just do what we tell them. And so they said, let's introduce this music into the school system. Let's introduce this type of mentality. Let's put fluoride in the water. So they started lobbying and putting these things into motion here in the US. And so when you look at that, and then you look at kind of the history behind Hollywood and the whole entertainment industry from the US, you can see a propaganda under the surface and a kind of mind control that went behind, infiltrating those entertainment industries with these different hertz and frequencies. And so a really great book to look up for all of this stuff, to kind of cross-reference and, look at the information, is called The Book of 528 by Dr. Leonard Horowitz.
It's on order. I'm waiting for it to get here.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
very excited about it.
Yeah, so that whole book is really about what we're talking about right here, and he goes into great detail about all of that. And the thing that I find really interesting is that there's lots of things that I agree with, and there's some things that I don't, personally. Like Dr. Leonard Horowitz talks a lot about how he's not about 432 and how it's completely wrong. And then you have people in the 432 camp talking about 528, saying it's completely wrong. So, you have to kind of not take anything personally when you're doing this research, and be open, have an open mind, and just through that kind of go through, does this resonate with me? It's almost like kinesiology, where you're, does this resonate with my body? Does this feel good to me? And kind of, exploring in that realm, because there are so many different schools of thoughts and different opinions. And ultimately, we are powerful, empowered, intuitive beings. And if you can connect with your intuition and feel what resonates with you, I believe it's an easy process to kind of pick and choose the things that you're taking for your journey, and also the things that you're going to work with, like frequencies and things like that.
For sure. The previous, what's the word I'm looking for? Interview. Yep.
Yeah.
What we're doing now. The previous interview I did with the wonderful Tennille Bentley, who you also know, she was talking about intuition, and how when she looks at something or reads something or hears something, it's about, how does it feel in her body? If it feels light, then it's good, it feels right. And if it feels heavy, or like that's obviously wrong for her.
Right.
I kind of do the same sort of thing. And it's interesting how many people aren't actually connected to their intuition, like and they do follow, and they, it's like mainstream media. It's like, well, the news said this, or the government said this. It's like, so like,
Yeah.
how about, like looking outside of that? But that's another story.
Well, before we leave that, I just want to say one thing. So
yes.
Frequently I get in conversations with people who will say, but what's the science that backs this up? And there are some things that you can pull out and show studies and do that. But what I always have to remind people is that, like, when you're working with like stats and data from kind of clinical research, you have to remember how that stuff takes place. And what I mean by that is, like, 90% of the time, the people who are benefiting from that stats and data are the people who are paying for it. And so when you start looking at the research, and I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying quite a lot, most of it is paid for by the people who are benefiting from the data's outcome. And so when you look at that, I always ask people, how many times have you heard of sound healing killing anyone? And I was like, I don't think you'll ever find a study or a case that's going to show you that sound healing has killed somebody. But I said, look at the American Medical Association and look at all of the prescription drugs that are issued every year that kill thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And then I said, look at the diet of the mainstream American, where it's complete, processed foods and huge fats. and the obesity rate here in the US, and then just heart disease in general. And so, you start looking, and I say funding for sound healing is never going to be, because it's not musicians in the places of power. It's, the medical establishment in the places of power. So they want to show you that you need their prescription drugs to keep moving forward,
Yeah.
right? So I think that this is a really powerful time that people have to realize that it is true that you in some ways have to become your own doctor to do research, because you intuitively know your body better than any person that's in a outside space will ever know your body. And so I think that I'm not saying that people don't need medical treatment or medical advice or consultation. I'm just saying that that has to be an element, just as you becoming more intuitive and learning your body and the mind-body connection and that intuitive power that you hold needs to be at the forefront more, than anything. And then from there, you're able to make those more educated choices of like what doctor to see and where to go, and then how modalities and nutrition and those kind of things that pair up with your self-care. And I think that you have to remember, a lot of times there's like our government gave tuberculosis in blankets to the Native American Indians as an offering. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but
No,
there was an offering where they were freezing and it was a winter, and they were given blankets as a gift. Like, here's some blankets to keep you warm, but it actually had TB in the blankets, and it ended up killing so many Indians. And like, you have to remember, when people are referring to the government as this overseer or protector, there are just countless issues and times in history where it's proven that the focus is more about being a corporation than it is a protector of the people.
Power,
you know what I'm saying?
Control, right? Yeah.
Right. So, not to get too revolutionary, but just to say, like, your intuition is the first and foremost powerful tool that you have to decipher truth in this world that is very uncertain. And even now with like COVID, this is just a very uncertain time, and there's a lot of information out there that's incorrectly labeled or just false. And so you have to really trust the news sources that you're getting your information from, as well as, like Tennille said, does this resonate with me? Does this feel true? And to really open that power of intuition.
How does one, get more in touch with their intuition if they're not, you say they're tuning in to this podcast for the first time, they're listening to you and they're like, I thought that was like, I don't know, whatever, like woo-woo shit, or I don't know. Like, how would one start to kind of tune into that more? Like, how do you build that?
I think that compassion for a person that is not creative, I would say compassion is the first place to start. And, in that compassion and empathy, you let yourself dive deeper into empathy and into compassion. And it's something that opens those floodgates where you start intuitively feeling out those situations and people in your life. And developing it is finding someone, a friend, a family member, a intimate partner, someone that will explore deeper with you those powers. But for me, it's definitely creativity. And I'm a visual artist as well as a poet and a musician, play like 25 different instruments, and anything creative, graphic design, video editing, anything like that I love doing. And for me, I find the more creative I am and the deeper I go with that creativity, I find more intuitive dots that I'm connecting, and so I'll give you just this really basic exercise. Is you can go to bookstores and get poetry books, like at a used bookstore for like anywhere from like $2 to $6 here in the US, right? And so lots of times I'll just go into a bookstore and pick out poetry books and, 10, 15 of them at a time, take them back home, get out a notebook with some paper, and I'll open up the poetry book to the first page. And as soon as I open that page, whatever the first word is that jumps out, I'll write it down in my notebook, and I'll put a little circle in the top left corner of my page, and I'll call that my word palette. And so I'll just flip open to the first page, and the first word that jumps out, I'll put that word down. And then I'll just go through the books and get about 20 to 30 words in my word palette, right?
Yeah, cool.
And then from the word palette, you then can arrange a title of your poem from that word palette. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And so you write your poem, and then a lot of times people will be inspired just from that poem title to start writing or journaling with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you want to, you can actually create the whole poem from that word palette. Like, just keep refilling it, opening a page, first word that jumps out, write it down, and just keep doing that and write the whole poem. And so what you're doing in that is you're taking your judgment and your thought out of the process of creation, and you're basically just becoming an open channel. And the more that you do this exercise, it's very simple. And a lot of times by the third or fourth, time of doing this, people are writing really amazing poetry. And they say, I never knew I was a poet. How could I do this? And I said, because you got out of your way.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? There's no judgment. You have no thought in the creation of it, but you're becoming an open channel. And so once you learn to do this on a repeated basis, then eventually you won't need the books anymore. It'll just be you channeling in the information. And so that is an exercise that's very easy to do to get you moving into an intuitive direction.
That is actually brilliant. I love that. I've never heard of that. I've never thought about it but it makes sense. It's really cool. Thank you for that.
Do you know William Burroughs?
I've heard of
The Naked Lunch.
The Naked Lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never actually read it.
So that's where that process comes from. It's called the cut up method. And so basically William Burroughs was at a party, and a painter took a painting off the wall, and he cut the painting with an X-Acto knife, and then he put it, re-glued it and put it on another canvas during the party. And so William Burroughs was a writer, and he was watching that, and he said, well, if he can do that with a painting, I can do that with my poems. Yeah. And so he did a whole novel from this cut-up method, and everybody thought he was just on massive amounts of drugs because it was so creative and so out there.
Was he?
But it was, yeah, I think he probably did do some drugs, but
that's not the point here. Yeah.
The process of the cut-up method is really what made that. And so I created this thing, this exercise from reading about that cut-up method, and I thought you don't have to cut up anything. You can just do it with your mind. Open a book, first letter, it jumps out. And so we created that, and we use it in a workshop that we do a couple times a year, and it's always been very successful with having breakthroughs with people's intuition. So
awesome. That's really cool. I'm definitely gonna use that one myself, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk to you about listening to Smile, and you actually create an album of like 6 or 7 plus songs per month.
Yes.
Yeah, is that right? Which incredible feat, like for anyone who's a musician or people that are not even musicians that, have their favorite musician putting out albums. They know that their favorite musician never puts out an album a month because it's, that's huge. It's huge work. But you do it, and your work is incredible, and I love your work. Can you tell me about that? Because there's a reasoning behind you putting out an album out a month of different music every time, all with different frequencies and different thoughts behind that particular album for that month. Can you tell me why you do that?
Yeah. So a lot of the programs that work with like binaural beats or sound healing that do albums, they might have like 5 or 6 albums. And then when you buy into that program, you're using those same albums with your clients for years at a time. And I I'm a creative person, and I'm very goal oriented. Like let's keep moving into the next thing, the next phase, the next step, the next realm. And that evolution is important to me because it doesn't feel stagnant or boring. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to create a program where people could use these tools of frequency and vibration with their clients, that wasn't stagnant, that gave people something new and something fresh each month. And we developed the idea of working with the astrology and the current events to create a collective energy album that could be used with clients, for sound baths, guided meditations, as well as like one-on-one sessions with their clients. And then we wanted to create something that was really unique and special, where we could have them offer it for resale to their clients, and that they could also resell the program to other holistic practitioners and get, compensated, monetarily for that as well. So we created a multi-level license for the music, because we own the music outright and are creators and publishers of the music. We can do that. And then creating something new that was just like a soundtrack for the month, for people who are working with the music, that it would be something new, unique, and innovative, to help people use sound healing and bring more awareness to this modality for an actual, healing option for people that were going through issues, like anxiety, pain, fear, illness, anything like that. So
Yeah, which is, yeah, it's just incredible. And I personally am, I haven't, I'm organizing some sound bath guided meditation events myself. I'll be starting that very soon. And I'm actually very excited to be using your work, your music. And for anyone that's interested as well, we've got a special on at the moment. Or it's kind of ongoing, isn't it? So if you go to listeningtosmile.com and you check out all Ian's work, all his music and his albums, and if anything actually jumps out at you and you want to purchase it, it's generally, what is it, $25 American dollars per album. But if you put in, when you go to purchase, put in the discount code of Ruth, RUTH, and the number 2 and 0, so Ruth 20, you actually get $10 off from that. So it's actually $15 per album. And incredible stuff. Like, it really is, like, it's and it's different every time as well. It's not just, like what you would expect, for the non, for the maybe not so spiritual people out there, like that, would maybe walk into a yoga studio and there's, gongs going off or sound bowls. Like, I mean, yeah, there's a bit of that as well, but you actually incorporate like different styles of music into your work, which is really cool. And I, for one, like, love your work. It's actually incredible.
thanks.
So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting started with those live events and using your stuff and seeing the good stuff that comes from people, being um, in that space where your music is doing its thing, and I'm sure it'll be different for everyone. But it's again, bringing up to Neil, she says that, for her, she likes to use 432 in her music and in her events, and she says that 432, or not necessarily 432, but whatever frequency music that you choose to listen to, it does what it's meant to do for you. Like, it's not, it's not one type of, hertz, one type of frequency does this for you and it will do the same thing for everyone. It's literally, it'll do whatever it's meant to do for you, whatever, maybe blockages you might have, or illnesses that you might have. It'll just work in a different way for everyone. So, which is really cool, super cool. Yeah. That's that's a statement, wasn't a question. You weren't meant to say anything there. Okay. Cool. If people want to get in touch with you, or find your stuff, where can they go?
So we have a couple sample albums on Spotify. So you can find us just by typing Listening to Smile on Spotify. Then we have listeningtosmile.com that has lots of information about frequency and also samples of our music on there. There's ways that if you want to work with our music in a commercial setting with your practice, that we have options available through that. And the same where if they wanted to sign up to become a practitioner that uses this music in their practice, they could use Ruth 20 when they're signing up. And every person that comes through will be supporting you as well as Listening to Smile and getting started. And then they'll be able to do the same, use the music and then refer people, and also make resells of the music. So those are ways to reach us. And then on YouTube, we have some videos and some things that are available. But the albums that are monthly albums are only available through the affiliates. So they would only be able to hear that music through working with you at your events or by becoming an affiliate themselves. And then we do have some things that are available to the general public that rotate out every couple months or so.
Awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah.
What's your favorite frequency? Yeah. Have you got one?
Yeah.
More than one.
No, definitely 528. People always ask, what were you using to lose the weight? And that was I was actually listening to 528 hertz for almost a year. I just really worked with that frequency solely for almost a year. And I really felt like it created huge movement with my dyslexia and my weight issue that I was dealing with. A lot of people will say that 528 works with creativity in a big way as well. And so that's definitely one of my favorites. But if I had to pick one, I would say 111 hertz. So 111 hertz has shown in clinical trials that it actually has helped with anxiety, like to relieve anxiety. But if you look around the world, a lot of the ancient sites of ruin are what they can gather tuned to the acoustics of 111 hertz. And it's from everything from Egypt to just different sites all over the world. There's even some caves, sacred sites that have been found to be acoustically tuned to 111 hertz. And it's a very interesting fact. And when you look at the solfeggio scale, not all of them, but most of the intervals between the notes are 111 hertz apart. And so it's really interesting. And so especially when you get into numerology 111, when you look up that number, it's just it's really interesting when you look at the numerology and the acoustics, the hertz, like the vibroacoustic therapy that goes into working with that frequency is just really powerful. So it's always been a really special frequency just because of the symbolism and all the interconnectedness of like the numerology and the power of that frequency. So I would say 528 hertz and then 111 hertz, 111 hertz.
Awesome. I'll need to look more into 111. I haven't. I'm still learning about all this stuff. But 528 being the frequency of love, it makes sense because if you're coming from a place of maybe self kind of sabotage and not really loving yourself too much, and then if you're listening to 528 frequency of love over and over and over and over again, it's opening you up and it's creating that love, that self-love. It's obviously going to make those changes in that way where instead of like gorging yourself because you feel down or you don't like yourself, so you just want to cover it with food and feel good because food junk food or whatever it is, like just makes you feel good. It
Yeah.
lights up the brain, with those feel good hormones. And if you don't need that anymore, if you're just lighting up your brain with feel good hormones because you love yourself, then obviously makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. That's really cool. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah. I've actually decided to use 528 at my first event. So see how
That's
that
cool.
goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's
Yeah.
really powerful one.
That's super cool. Is there anywhere else, if people want to look further, you know, there is literally a rabbit hole of all this, the information out there about frequencies is huge. Maybe you could let people know, are there other people to follow, or, places to go in learning about frequency? Obviously, listening to Smile is huge. You've got heaps of information, and obviously music that people can turn to, but it is such a huge topic. Yeah, would you recommend anywhere else for people to go?
Yeah, so Tom Kenyon, if you've never heard of him, Tom Kenyon is a really awesome person to check out. He uses vocal toning, singing bowls, and like chimes and bells and things like that in his events. But it's really his intuition that channels all the stuff through. So he'll make sounds like whales with his mouth, and all kinds of just really out there stuff. So if you're into that kind of stuff, Tom Kenyon is a really good guy to check out. And then Jonathan Goldman is another one. He's on the Hay House. Jonathan Goldman's probably one of the most famous sound healers. He's been doing it probably for 30 years or so.
Okay.
And those are two places I would definitely start. And then, like I said, the book of 528 is with Dr. Leonard Horowitz. And then also, I would say the first book that I would get in starting this would be The Healing Power of Sound by Dr. Mitchell Gaynor.
Yeah. Awesome.
Very, very powerful book. So
yeah, very cool. Now I just want to quickly touch on something before we close off.
okay.
And it's probably might not be quick. I don't know. I think it's
Yeah.
Power of the mind. You were talking earlier about, using your mind to have more control over your body and your thoughts. And when you have control over your thoughts, you have more control over your body. And when you do that, you can, you've literally got the power to heal yourself. Yeah. Like, how, like, we obviously don't know how far, like, we can, what am I trying to say here? We don't really know how powerful we actually are. Do you have like an idea? Do you have like, have you ever thought about, how powerful is our brain? Like, how powerful is our mind? What potential do you think we have that maybe we haven't experienced yet? Or maybe we have, but we don't really know about it.
Yeah.
Or the CIA is doing experiments and we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing I think that you have to realize is that, number one, how powerful your thoughts are. That statement, period, how powerful your thoughts are, period. And then two, that your brain is actually a entity unto itself that's operating on multi-dimensions. So even though we're in this kind of closed perception of like Earth, you're actually operating on different dimensions through your brain. The way that your brain is interacting, your consciousness is conscious and aware on multiple levels of dimensions, which I know is kind of far out for some people to think about. But I remember there was a book I was reading, and it was talking about neuroscience, and it was saying one of the things that really stumped scientists was that there was a guy that was documented where there was some kind of bacteria in his brain that ate most of his brain, where he was walking around talking and functioning. And they said this makes no sense, because when they were looking at him and they were looking at his brain, they were saying, he was walking around talking and functioning like a normal human being, but half of his brain was literally ate by this bacteria. And it was just, it didn't make sense. How is this guy doing this? And so, now there's studies that are showing like how many levels and different dimensions the brain is interacting on. It's not my area of forte, so I can't go into huge depths of like how they've determined that. But you can see, if you look online, you can look at multiple, studies and clinical trials and just articles that are referencing these studies, these clinical studies about the brain. And just there's lots of ongoing studies on consciousness now, because people are realizing like our thoughts are creating and changing matter in this reality. And so once you start wrapping your head around that, even if you don't fully understand it, but just the idea and the kind of perspective of how powerful your brain is, it's truly fascinating. There was a guy that had a near-death experience that was sharing his story that I was reading about, and he was saying that these angels came to him when he died, and they were showing him that there was 12 versions of him, he said he could see himself in a line, and that he was operating on 12 different dimensions, living a life, and that each life he was experiencing a different life. Like one, he was a trash man, and another, he was $1 million CEO guy. And, so he was experiencing all of these different lives simultaneously. And his explanation was that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing right now. And that all of these informations and experiences come back together as one when we, exit through death or whatever, moving to the next level. And I always found that to be very fascinating, whether it's true or it's not true. Just the thought of thinking about that, where you can surrender into, I should be doing this or I should be doing that. And just knowing that you're on the path for whatever experience this part of you is supposed to be getting right now. And so through that, it just gave me a sense of comfort of learning to surrender a little bit more through that story, whether it's true or not true, just the perception or perspective of what that would be like. And just realizing to be okay with whatever happens and to be at peace with it. And so I always thought that was just really interesting. So I think that we're just getting, the tip of the iceberg right now on how powerful our consciousness is. But I definitely think the one thing that most people can agree on is that it's more than this body. That this body, we're here to experience this life and go through this experience for a learning process like a classroom. But our consciousness is far bigger than this body that we're in right now.
Yeah. So play big.
Yes.
Yeah. Go hard or go home. That's what they say. Ian, thank you so very much. Lots of love, my friend.
Yeah.
I love talking to you. And people out there, please look Ian up. Look at his stuff. He's a genius. He's a genius, man.
Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you.